different disciplines. That's why 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we started to become very interested in life science. Of course, we're not biologists, so maybe tonight I can imagine most of us here who are biologists. We cannot enrich the conversation, please. I guess we have artists, people from the arts, design, and biology here right now. Probably. Probably. So yeah, and so this is we decided to present you our ideas through our web archive, and you're very welcome to use the web archive. It's in English and German. We have it for 2 years now. It's a lot of content. All the conferences are on. You can get access to books and everything. And we come to the current project, Terra Xenobiotica, a little later. But just to make the connection clear, why we are sitting tonight here has to do with Hideo and Georg. And we had, in the most difficult time in the spring 2020, when we were all at home, locked, we reached out very far. And through Georg and by Club Tokyo, we made a viral cloud, Berlin Tokyo. And we made it new PET Berlin, and in the evening in Tokyo, a lot of people came, artists, designers, biologists, and we could learn and meet. And it was, we have to really say we are very grateful to be here in Tokyo now and to meet in person. This is very, very special. And we expressed so many ideas and art and science research. Even Henry Tan brought me to Singapore in March. So that has also to do with the viral cloud. You see here Georg Tremmer on the upper left, and Farah Peluso, an artist and designer. We will talk about her later on the right. And then we also see Sashiko Hirokuma, and she was speaking. And yeah, we had these meetings for, I think, 40 times. And that was very meaningful to meet every 2 weeks. So you can see here, we started in April 2020. Can you read that? Is that okay? Should I make it louder?
Yeah.
Better?
Or Joe song.
Better. So we had, we had a lot of biologists and artists presenting and talking and meeting and talking about work in progress. And then also Hideo, he was speaking in February 2021, and also Matthias, and a colleague of ours, he has a lab. Yeah. Matthias Rillig is a professor for applied ecologies at Freie Universität in Berlin, very interested for artistic research. And then we invited you both to think about art and science. And that was also very important for our cloud in Berlin and in Europe. So this is really meaningful that this year is obviously kind of like an on-site experience after the. It's also important in 2020-21 we had so international outreach. We tried to keep it at Art Laboratory Berlin. I have a colloquium every 6 weeks. I hope to make it in a matinee in Europe, so maybe you all could join it as well if you want. We tried to keep on virtual outreach that we can have an international crowd. But still, of course, we have a space in Berlin, we have exhibitions, we have workshops, many workshops. And talking about art science research, we would like to tell you a little bit about an art science group. We exist for now 5 years, and it's still ongoing. DIY, Hack the Panke. The Panke is the river in Berlin, center of Berlin and north of Berlin, a river that flows in the river Spree. And we are a group of biologists and scientists based in Berlin, internationally artists and scientists. Over.
So yeah, here are some of the team. Larger. So Inka Agap, who's actually from Japan originally. Kat Austin, who is an artist but has a PhD in chemistry. Sarah Hermanutz, Daniel Lamel, who's a microbiologist at the Rillig Lab. I'm in there. Joanna McLean. Actually, she's moved from the GFZ to the Rillig Lab through her connections here. India Mansour from the Rillig Lab. Elliot Morrison, who's a biochemist and also has an arts background as well. Barbara Peluso, designer and artist. Neda Popov, a media and sound artist. Ina and James Whitehead, who's also connected to the Rillig Lab. Yeah.
So why we use the river to have a platform to work with. And also the water is an amazing idea, not only about ecological topics like microplastics or microbiodiversity, but we also, I just wanted to show you here the topic of interest. It's very wide. As interdisciplinary as we try to be very open. And in our group, we make workshops with always interdisciplinary little groups. So you can see we're interested in microplastics, biomatter, artistic research. I think artistic research is our basis well for 10, 15 years now. Microflora, fauna, larger features in the punk, hydrofeminism is very important also to us, not only artists, but also scientists become more and more interested. And water ecology, community coalescence, experiments with algae. We made several biographic columns in the last few years. And soil is also an ongoing topic, and cultural history, natural history along the Panke. So we started actually with
Unreal Ecologies, microplastics workshop organized by Kat Austin, who, as I said, is an artist but with a chemistry background, and Joanna McLean, a biologist who just finished her master's on, we call it microbiome of plastic, what lives on plastic waste. And now, this year, she just finished her PhD on bacteria that digest plastics. And together, they made a workshop in which participants went along the Panke with DIY implements, like we used the netting that's used in beer production for DIY beer, and filtered out matter from the water, and then put it through a series of sieves, and then with a hydrogen peroxide, heating it up and basically dissolving all the organic matter. What was left were minerals and microplastics. And using a dye, we were able to differentiate. So people were able to take part and actually, collect microplastics from this river. They also got a lot of larger plastics and other objects. It was a 2-day workshop with a lot of DIY chemistry and analysis, but also a little bit of like marine ecosystem. While we were filtering things out, the first filter grabbed a lot of very small, like 2 to 3 millimeter size shrimp that were living in the Panke, which we then also looked at under microscope and then returned them to the river. And this was our first, we had founded about 4 months earlier, and then we had got a little micro grant to do this workshop, and we continued it later, doing it with both the public and with students. Their Kat is in April 2019, we did the workshop with Fridtjof Kawinski, who was a science teacher in a local school. And we did it also again for general public, and we brought his school classes in, and which was interesting. And
we have made the experience that when you bring in the broad audience, the non-specialist, it becomes very difficult to talk about science or art. It's very easy to talk about science with your peers, colleagues. You talk in footnotes, but when you have a lay public, when you have people who do not know the science, you have to be very comprehensive. It's a nice challenge. We did quite a lot of science activities. I mean, next to art exhibition. We talk later on about.
And they're all kind of mixed in. But I would also say we would spend over an hour if we were to click onto each page, but you can find this on our website. If you're interested in one particular project, like microplastics, go to that page, click onto it and see it in more detail. We also have a search function on the website to remember the project.
Yeah.
Search that way. Yeah, we have Sarah Hermanutz and Farah Peluso are artists. Farah has a design background as well. India Mansour is a biologist. And so they were doing a workshop, which was basically trying to find the microflora and fauna of the river. So doing this plating. We also made Gradsky columns with people, and we did this actually interestingly first in class, and then we had the participants. So we had the samples from the school class, and then showed what had been collected and was growing. Yeah, from the school.
It was probably most challenging to work with the students, the pupils, to motivate them and to
Yeah, it was a really
explain.
inner city school. So like there was a science club, but
Very
really
challenging.
enthusiastic, but some of the other kids were, rowdy teenagers.
A lot of algae in the river, and
Also,
so more and more art or science departments get curious what we do with the Hack the Panke. They see that we do continue to now find it. And that is very enriching. We have now the microbiodiversity workshop. We have talked for the third time. And for my research, for my own research from art historical point of view, I'm fascinated what it means. I call it workshopology. It's like the segment of workshop. It's not an exhibition. It's not a lab experiment. It's something open. It's performative. It has a process. It is integrated. It is a playful format. And if you repeat the same, it becomes always different. This is really fascinating. So it's endlessly fascinating what workshops can be. And yeah. But maybe also to show you more about the project, to talk 30, 40 minutes, not to 2 hours. We did also another art science research project between 2018 and 20. And mindfully, it was biotechnologists from Technical University in Berlin. They invited us while applying for funding, really from the start, and they said, yeah, local tree mushroom as a sustainable material for the future. Yes, we're interested, but only when we can bring artists and designer in the project. So yeah, we have to discuss this interdisciplinary. See on the left, what is it, a tree mushroom from around Berlin. And to the right, it's a bioplastic from Terra Xenobiotica. So basically,
for sure, fungal and also biomides, diatom.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also made a book. You can see this as the app on our website. It's all in English and German. Then we had the residency program. That's what I meant. We brought the artists Teresa Schubert and Farah Peluso in. They were in the lab of applied molecular microbiology and also bioprocess engineering. And for one example, what was really nice to see that it's important to have different mindsets on one topic. For instance, Teresa was putting questions the scientists have not put. For instance, would the mycelium grow different when we induce it with sound? And it did. And scientific colleagues would not put the question. There was a lot of inspiration both ways. And the Farah and Teresa also did produced artwork that we exhibited in the House of the Future in Berlin, but we also exhibited the scientists a result, like fungal bricks or fungal experiments. So this was basically artistic research from Teresa, she also made work in the forest. It was a citizen science component. We were collecting tree mushrooms, and we cultivated them in the lab. Went with the audience in the lab. It was risky, but it was really successful. And the cultivated tree mushroom was the basis for the culture collection.
There were actually two experiments. The grant was a grant to mix scientific research in the university with citizen science. We brought in the artist component, but then in a way that, for instance, collecting of the samples for the one department doing local materials for tree mushrooms. Some of those mushrooms were collected with the public. And the other project was connected with trying to make synthetic lichens. So trying to separate the fungal and algal components of lichens and then reintroduce them to one another without their attendant microbiome. So they could, in theory, be produced in a larger amounts. So faster cultivation.
And then this led to the artwork niche from Sara Peluso, where it was interesting. It brought the lab to the mix for bioprocess engineering, which was every Tuesday and to change them. Really, I mean, you all know this, but it was lab work, but then it was in the museum. So that was the interesting component. And yeah, to make it visible, it's of course not the only task and not the only aesthetic power of art, but there was a lot of experimentation that included the scientific action in this artwork action. And
it's been interesting, the project ended in 2020, but I have, especially with the bioprocess engineering project with Clara and Teresa, I have collaborations with them. So continue expand.
So did you say that picture with synthetic lichen or different one?
It was part of a process. So the goal of the project was to separate out fungal and algal polybionts and then put them back together again. Actually, during this process, they started with some other fungal and algal components that are related to the ones that I like to see if they can make co-cultures. So it's all about making co-culture. So this has, it wasn't from this particular one, it's a later version which does have the two components. But this was a test one to see if you could create a co-culture, how that would live. And they chose a fungus which is related to the lichen fungus and an algae that is, I think, the same as one of the polybionts. They would co-culture alone. Yeah, the idea is lichens grow very slowly, and sometimes they produce really interesting chemicals. And what if you could produce them in mass, give them a lot of nutrient? If you do that with a lichen, then the holobiont bacteria that's on it will go crazy and probably kill the lichen in the process.
And to jump to a very different project, but that is actually could also be interesting to when we think what it means. Say after the pandemic, we're kind of still in it. We don't want to admit it, but maybe after the big wave of the pandemic, how is this possible to me? How can we create social encounters? There were a lot of ruptures, breaks. And it was important for us in Berlin and in Europe really to say, we have to learn from the global south. We have to learn. So we brought artists from Southeast Asia and from Latin America, from Berlin. But we said, come to Berlin and we do an exhibition. So what you see here is like an art exhibition. This is also what we do. not only, but more. But also we did workshops, talks, and the whole conference. And yeah, so that was last year. And we curated this with our colleague Tuce Erek. Tuce lives now for 7 years in Berlin and works with us at Architecture Berlin for 5 years. She comes from Turkey. And it was Tengal Trilon from Philippines, curator. So we had all different backgrounds, and we called it hackers, makers, thinkers. Again, to be very infiltrate in a creative sense. And the subtitle has to do with the South Korean collective that you see here, the Riceburg Sister Club, collective experiment in social fermentation. They make a lot of work with fermentation, and they consider this also as a metaphor, as to come together and melt and learn from one another. So we had Indonesian artist Irene Agrivina, and specific from Mexico, and Riceburg Business Club, and you want to talk a little bit about
Sure, Interspecifics is a collective mostly based in Mexico City, though one of the members is currently in Amsterdam. And this project, Codex Virtualis, basically came from a series of residencies they had, including one with xenobiology. So they were using an AI and feeding it information about singular celled organisms and how they are affected by different changes in temperature and so on. The idea was the AI is trying to predict what the changes will be with climate change. So then they become from actual to fictional organisms, because the fictional organisms are created by the AI projecting, speculating how they would be. But they made this kind of codex. That was the art, regular artwork. But they also did a workshop, a 2-day workshop with people, and it was interesting because we had it split. The two main protagonists of this collective were supposed to be in Berlin, and an invitation from the Technical University, but that was cancelled. But the other member was in Amsterdam, came, Mauro Pebble, and so we had an online portion with a live member live, and it was basically creating a storytelling. It's a workshop they've done with teenagers and with adults. In this case, it was with adults, for a lot of college students, and it was to actually take some of the images from microbial or multicellular, small multicellular organisms, and feed them into the AI, and then build stories on the information that was harvested. So that was the first portion. And then we had, okay, then Rice Floating Sisters Club are 4 artists from, or 3 artists from South Korea. And they're very interested in both the making of food, in fermenting, and in farming, especially urban farming. So people who have gardens, or who urban horticulture. And they went around Berlin for 2 months and met with different urban gardens, gardeners, urban farmers, and kind of connected with the community, did some workshops, small workshops with these people, collected objects from around the city. At the same time, they were doing a lot with making cultures for rice wine, and then also making cultures or that are made for fertilizer gardening. And they made a little sculpture that both workshop making rice wine and making fertilizer. These are fertilizing bacteria that are growing here in the compost. These are the rice wine. And Rapp is an artist from Yogyakarta. She's one of the founders of Haunt there. And this was also a project that came from a community project in the city. And it had to do with traditional versus modern fertilizers. So trying to reintroduce certain, I think there's actually a cyanobacteria that was common, and it's actually symbiotic. There's a plant, sola. One is the sola, and the other is yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's a water plant. It's kind of like a duckweed, we call it in English. And I think it's sola is the kind of bacteria. It's just a symbiont. And it has an interesting effect is that it creates nitrogen, so it helps the rice grow as a natural fertilizer. It also is a light pesticide. It will kill, creates toxins that will kill the mosquito larvae. So there's all other advantage. And for this exhibition piece, she also made a bio battery out of it. And we also did a workshop on another project that she was involved in, which was to take soya waste to make use this SCOBY from the soya waste and make a bio paper or bio fabric. And in this case, it was a bio paper, and then just printing on it. Comet Lindsay is a Berlin-based artist who works with cyanobacteria. They're a sound artist and as well. So Comet creates these exhibitions where cyanobacteria is living in an installation. Usually there are some sensors that are sonified or create, he runs sound through them, or there's a whole series of processes and then that comes back as part of sound installation connected with the visual one. And there's often a story connected with it as well. She connects it to different locations in Berlin. Later work, another work of hers is more like narrative, but also with living cyanobacteria in it. But they also did a performance at the end of the exhibition with the sound, this modification. And Pei Lin is a designer, but really working in a kind of artistic mode, and a big project that predated the pandemic, but came in the formative part came up just before the pandemic, for virophilia. So it's a speculative future where future 22nd century culinary experiences include viruses not only affecting the food, but the eater. And there was this installation, a book, and a performance. It's really nice because we connected Pei with a local artist who's originally from Indonesia, but living in Berlin, also sound artist, but also a food artist. And so we had this wonderful dinner. We were doing research on the effects of different chilies, and we came upon actually a Latin American Caribbean chili that tends to burn not the tongue, but the throat when you're eating it. So the idea was that kind of people feel like they were catching a cold, the throat would burn. That would be part of it. Constancia Pina Pardo is a Chilean artist. And here she worked on making a quipu is an ancient Incan way of keeping records. It's a series of knots that are tied in string, and they would keep track of everything from population to produce. But it was also a form of writing or messaging. So the Incas would write; they would have messengers running with these quipus from village to village or to the main city with this information. In a way, it was early computer, and there are some people which are thought to be connected to, for instance, astronomy, to the positions of stars and seasons. What she did is she made a quipu using wool and copper. So the wool is around copper wire, also maybe connected with Chile, because it's one of the world's main producers or sources for copper. And it became a giant net for catching electromagnetic waves from the building, the street, so that it was sonified. So we had connected it, to the motherboard that you saw before, and then that was, in the end, kind of, I ended up going through a series of speakers, and she gave a Tipu workshop on making your own Tipus, and it's when she made this, she moved from Chile to Mexico City, and she worked with local women to produce the first version of this. It's interesting to mix like a South American with Central American traditions.
We went also to the Ethnographical Museum in the south of Berlin, that inspired her to work with Tipu 10 years ago. And that was interesting, because ironically, the biggest Tipu collection is in Berlin. And that brings us to the topic of colonialism. That's really, really important that the artist asked me to make a connection to the curators. And so I had really this feeling I have to do that. It was very difficult to organize. And I felt so under pressure because coming from Chile, the artist seeing the biggest Tipu collection in Berlin. So this is so it worked, and the conversation started very difficult, and I was very under pressure, but then it would work. The curators, the German curators, were very open, and so it was a very learning conversation. Really brilliant. It was fine. It was a very important moment for showing well. Yeah, I hope we do not go too much into detail. Please note questions or interrupt if we go too intense. We would like to show you also an exhibition. Here we have Kamak again. Kamak is a very interesting artist. This is an exhibition that is, as many our projects, directly related to climate crisis. It is from spring in March to April, May. We had the vicious cycle. We co-curated it with Tuce. And of course, again, the three artists, it's artistic research. And we can actually together go, just say our idea was, if you want, we can also read it together to that microplastic pollution is present everywhere. It moves around in the blood, lands in organs, and passes to infants via breast milk. So this exhibition was based on the closed cycle of human disturbance of the environment and its return to the human and non-human body. So we had investigative and research-oriented artist work to explore the problem of microplastics in soil or impact of climate change, etc. And what Kamak Lindsay did was basically a research based on the lake in southeast Berlin on the Müggelsee.
Yeah, and so she worked with scientists from the Helmholtz research on inland waters, and their collection of cyanobacteria from this river or from this lake. She made this installation, and it's interesting because they have algal blooms this summer. So it's actually a lake that was traditionally it was traditionally a place where people would go swimming in the summer, and they no longer can because every summer they through an algal bloom, so there's she connects it with that. But also with a story. There's a film from the 1930s about the working class around this area. And so she kind of connected it also with the idea of locality and change and disruption due to capitalism. And it's also it's a sound piece. There's a story in it, but there's also this background sound, which is also connected to sensors and electrodes that she runs through the current, so that interruption that the cyanobacteria blossoms in the container, it disrupts the sound.
And then we've had a sculpture by the Turkish artist Misha Mursalon, devouring earth in perishable quantities. and it works with washing machine filters and Arduino Uno, has a motor, and is based on industrial and found microplastics. And it's basically a rotating machine, which brings us back to the idea that it's a whole circle, basically. We devour plastic, we put it in out, we consume it, we throw it, we inhale it, we consume it, we distribute it, basically. Yeah. So the rotation was not only a mechanical movement based on a washing machine, but it was basically also a metaphorical disturbance.
Yeah, it's also kind of very much, for instance, every time you wash clothes, you have synthetic materials, microplastics go into the wastewater. So that was one part of it, but also these filters are kind of digesting microplastic, breaking it into smaller bunches during the time of the use.
And then also another very, very interesting artist we were very happy to present from Berlin, Sibylle Neumeier. Sibylle is, I really say, artist and researcher. Very, very basic, a lot of theory of the Anthropocene, post-humanism, new materialism, and also talking about the pandemic in 2020. She was invited for a residency at the Natural History Museum Karlsruhe in south of Germany, but it was a problem to go, so it was also the archive, the digital archive, where she would work. And
she was really interested in the idea of data. So the story in the piece is connected to the effect of climate change, dragonflies, especially in East Africa. But a lot of it is also about the data and the fact that everything we know goes through data and analysis of data. So the piece kind of connects to that. The little pyramids are also based on the kind of traps that scientists use to capture at night the dragonflies or other insects as well. So it has this mix between what you see and what you don't see, the actual ultraviolet light, the amount of data, and then reconstructing using computer reconstruction of the information. And then so you have information, and then you start to analyze how you get that information.
Mm-hmm. So, and the last exhibition I'd like to share with you, we had in the summer, in the spring and summer in Berlin, was very much based on body politics, biopolitics. It was truly bio art with all the necessities of caretaking, caretaking from the artist, and led art as a preparation. Three interesting artworks. White Feather Hunter, a Canadian artist, makes a PhD at Xenobiotica in Australia. And Lindsay Walsh, American artist, they make art and research and knowledge from New York, based in Berlin. And Shuli Chang from Taiwan, now based in Paris. And Evan Chardonnay, also French, Sophie based together. We want to do stuff together. So we can say that here together, the exhibited artwork critically reflects about nature, matter, and health of female and non-binary bodies through artistic and scientific research, exploring the use of menstrual therapy for tissue culture, proposing new modes of care within the context of female non-binary health, and discussing both traditional forms and new possibilities of reproduction. And in this context, we also did a big festival. If we have time, I can later on talk about this, but maybe only not too long. Maybe we can have these three, because I think they also invite for an interesting discussion about body politics, feminist body politics, and they also, I think, invite us, and I think the group tonight is ideal to think, what can bio art do, or what can bio art inspire maybe scientists to go along? Let's discuss. So just quickly, maybe to introduce you to the work. Subtitle.
White Feather Hunters, the Witch in the Lab Coat.
Yeah.
Ongoing project, part of her PhD research in Symbiotica. And she was really interested in something rather new, but surprisingly new, considering that for the last few decades, there's been an attempt to find easier ways to get human stem cells, and that could be used for medical purposes. There are other biotechnological ways to make stem cells, but they have certain problems. And the most commonplace was fetal tissue, and that had ethical problems in some countries. And all along, there's a very easy source for stem cells from menstrual serum. So basically, when the female body menstruates, all these cells that would have been there for the placenta, are full of stem cells. And at Symbiotica, she was culturing these and then created an installation. We actually had to taken the stem cells from her own menstrual blood and then cultured them and made a culture of them. And we transported them liquid nitrogen from Perth to Berlin, found a lab. It's not so easy, but we did. Actually, a really great lab to work in, and then made this installation. Actually, the red color is the nutrient, it's not the blood. When the stem cells started to grow, there were kind of a white sediment on the bottom of some of these flasks, and that's how she differentiated them. So we had an incubator and a pump for the nutrients all in one installation. It's also under cover, plexiglass cover. We had challenges. It worked fine. We usually have a 7 to 8 week exhibition period, which is for bioart rather long, and it worked fine for about 4.5 weeks. But 4 weeks in, we noticed some contamination, some yeast, and by the very end, the yeast took over to the point where it started to clog some of those hoses. So the artist had already gone back to Australia in consultation with her. We tried to solve the problem and we couldn't. So we shut off the pump, and basically, the last week the stem cells slowly died. So we had a wake. We had a team, and the artist had a wake for the cells. And,
And then also another, okay, we are biased because we're the curators and the researchers of this work, but still, let's discuss this work. I think it's very complex and multi-layered, and therefore very interesting. Lindsay Walsh has from family over generations. There's gene mutation that could very likely lead to breast cancer. And there's a very intense family story that we also share in the artwork. There's an installation. In the center is the chest piece that you can see here on silicon. And you can see maybe a liquid under the breast. And there's a liquid that Lindsay would feed the piece. You could see in the exhibition it was in the incubator. Body temperature, and where you can see the red liquids that was cancer cell being cultivated.
There was a cell culture with a BRCA2 gene mutation, which was taken from the original donor in the 1990s had stage 2 breast cancer.
Yeah.
And actually, when you immortalize the cells, you basically imitate the process of them becoming cancerous.
So also probably what is really important to know, and Lindsay would also tell in conversation, in an interview with their mother, the letter that they wrote to their mother, that you can see here to the right. Here. this was the most intimate from the whole installation, and we tried to put it in the corner very aside that the visitors could listen to the story very intimately. But the artist would share with us in conversation with a mother, and it would come to the point that the artist would ask, "Why did you bring me when I was just 18 to the analysis at the doctor? And maybe I did not want to know." So there complex family story going on. And the archival material that you can see on the larger monitor was from the 1950s in the US. Material with women after mastectomy and breast cancer. So it had a medical historical component, it had a autobiographical component, very interesting. And then again, and we're just writing for the Matter of Flux book. And I'm just writing now the text for this, and I have a lot of questions more than answers, but we're getting there. So we see in the center of the installation too is that garment. It can be like a second skin. It can be like also that the artist found out in the course of that art project when Lindsay was in St. Petersburg teaching the professor for art and science. The artist found out about non-binary identity, and so it was all really complex. and the being always confronted with medical results, even in Berlin, didn't go under medical. And we just had the opening, and after the press preview, we heard that there was a doctor result of the 85% probability of breast cancer. So it was very intense in a way. Also the question of how much do you bring this into the artwork, or how much is it like autobiographical based, but a very interesting piece. And then finally is an artwork that started at 2019 already.
Right. Shuli Jiang, working together with David Chaudronnet, who's a curator project, and it started with them having a residency with ultrasound, researchers with ultrasound. And it's interesting also, like ultrasound was started off as a military technology being used as a medical technology. So in part of it, there was a DIY process where musicians could use ultrasound. There was an installation which has a kind of a mock-up of a fetus and in uterus, and with a robot. In the last exhibition, the robot ceased to work, so shooting a special installation there, kind of deconstructing it. And we have an ongoing project, and on the 18th of November, that Shuli was invited originally to make a reading group in London for one of the exhibitions, and it was cancelled during the pandemic. But she actually adapted it to the pandemic. So they're been the first ones to realize it post-pandemic. Actually, the first ones to realize the project as part of our Permeable Bodies series. 3 reading groups: one on ectogenesis in the spring, one on ultrasound in early summer, and currently on surrogacy. It's ongoing. On 18th of November, we'll have a live stream with 10 participants who, including an academic leader, who can do a 1-month reading group on surrogacy. Yeah. And Shuli Chang, if you don't know her, she is quite an amazing artist, originally from Taiwan, moved a long time in the US, now is based in Paris. She's one of the first net artists. She was working in the late 90s in net art, and also a filmmaker. She'll have a screening of her new film in Kyoto on Wednesday.
And also Tokyo. Yeah. As well.
Also Tokyo, okay.
Yeah.
And so really an interesting artist. Also very involved with the art science projects with Fungi Network, Cilium Network Society, which we're tangentially involved with as well.
Okay, and very quick to the end of our little presentation. We would like to maybe more in mind than in person, but please everyone welcome. In the 10th of November, we're going to open up an exhibition with the Slovene artist Saša Spačal, Terra Xenobiotica, again, very intensely connected to artistic research. And with the artists, I think we work very, very intensely. And we work together in art context with microbiome, with codification, with non-human network, and also in conferences. And Saša was at the Rillig Lab, at the plant Ecologies at Freie Universität Berlin, and did soil chromatography. And from the soil from the former airport in Berlin, Tempelhof.
Which is now a park for.
It's now a recreation park, and the idea is polluted soil and idea of why don't I just see this just for to make it not too long. So it's newly produced artwork, if you allow me to read this together with you. So the artist in the artwork delve into the soil life hidden beneath the ceaseless traffic of airports, then note of Western human civilization. So the artist says toxins are seeping into the ground, creating unfamiliar lands that call for different kinds of stewards, ones that navigate and nurture. So basically, what we will be having here is a lot of, it comes from the science, and it goes with chromatography, and she will show 85 chromatograms because the PFAS is now 85 years old.
And it's one of the major, in airports, one of the major pollutants. And you can tell between some of them where the soil is more or less polluted by the chromatogram shows records of life in the soil, like living parts of the soil, and where it's lacking, you can also see it. And then there will be a section where the results can be sonified by participation from the audience, with a kind of a scanner of sorts. And there's a film connected with it she did together with the cultural theorist Alison Sperling. It's also a collaborator as well. So it's a work that connects with cultural theory, with soil science, chemistry, and with the cultural history of airports.
Yeah, and to the end, whenever you want to contact us, free to ask questions beyond today, and then also just to show you that, of course, not only Chris and me, but also Tuche, who we mentioned, working with us, curator, project collaborator, also Carolina from Poland, based in Berlin as a researcher in curatorial. We have a colleague from the US as a researcher of queering ecologies. We have also the team that's supported by Alessia from Italy, Julie from Czech Republic, and Tim, our photographer and archivist. So basically, this is
Special thanks also to Rillig Lab, who worked with us and designed our website.
Yeah.
And archive.
That's it for the moment. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for very rich talk, and it's great to have to make such a complicated boundaries and rich, so many people can join together, and actually I have two basic questions. One is actually, what is art laboratory building? Is it a place or platform, or how did you fund it, or something like that? Could you?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's, maybe we have not explained it enough. Thank you for the question. We started in 2007. It's about 80 square meters of exhibition space.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an office at another part of the city, and we expand theater hall or university for conferences. So we have different places. We regularly do exhibitions, But as you see, we also do artist research or artist residence. We do workshops, we do conferences, we do publication. We call ourselves art and research platform. We don't have like that.
Right, well, we do have pop-up lab, but we have a series of containers in our storage area that we take out, and chemistry lab and a bio lab that we use for workshops. Members of the DIY Hack the Panke helped us put together. We have collaborations with some science labs where they hosted artists, but also we've done a few events, certain ones, like at the Technical University, we have these workshops, forging, and then going back and identifying, visiting the lab. Yeah, so we're really a platform, and we do a lot of research on the side.
Do you have any very special connection to Earth? Some, how do you say, fixed university or
We're not associated, we're not a part of a university, but we've had partnerships. So the AMM at the Technical University, so the applied molecular and microbiology and the bioprocess engineering, we had a two-year process with them, and we still have contacts there. The Freie University, the Rillig Lab, came about that we had multiple members from the lab involved in DIY Hack the Panke, and started to build a relationship with Matthias Rillig. Also has the option of bringing in outside researchers on small term residencies. Usually they're scientists, but he expanded research artists and has his own history of actually having inspired by artwork. Some of these collaborations lead to new directions in research. Yeah, more recently we've connected with the EZNE, which is it's a lab researching, connected with the degenerative diseases, but they hosted White Banner. Really were very enthusiastic about the future cooperation. So we're extremely thankful because it was a controversial topic. There were a lot of labs who just didn't want to deal with something that came from blood, which was also part of White Feather's topic. She was like saying the taboo. What shouldn't be a taboo, science shouldn't have taboos, but knowledge is situated. So scientists come from culture, so they carry their taboos from their culture into the lab. And then so it was really interesting to see what was a really open-minded viewpoint from this particular lab. It was very wonderful collaboration. Both sides were very happy.
Thank you. Question is, I think you showed a lot of interesting projects, and actually how such a collective project art for each project. For example, the Saša project, I think that she hit upon an idea about this one. It's easy to understand. But however, the collective project and how you are involved in the for example, do you, for example, suggest some topic for each exhibition or some for call for something or
we more kind of see that there are several artists doing something similar.
I see.
And then that starts our process. So we see several artists
curating.
Yeah, we're looking at what the artists are doing, and suddenly we see something that kind of connects together. Usually it's just from knowing the artists ourselves. We've had open calls in the past, but they're very time consuming and difficult. We had the wonderful privilege of being invited to curatorial swarm for a project by Ida Benke and Eben Kirksey, who they kind of managed the open call, and we were allowed to go through and sit through this project. And so we wanted, and it was agreed that everyone do their own project. We tried to bring them together, but funding for international levels didn't work. This was a project called M/Others and Future Humans. And we came up with a project, we ended up calling it the Camille Diaries. And the idea was we just saw the artists, some we knew, some were new to us. Sagawa was one of the artists. And it made us, just seeing the artists who they intrigued us more and more. It just makes us think of Donna Haraway's chapter in her last book called the Camille Stories. But it seemed to us that some of the artists were used as the head of Haraway, this idea of her kind of speculative future, that they were already doing these connections, human and non-human, in a nurturing way. And so, it tied things together in that end.
Okay.
But we go to the artwork house.
Sometimes also might come and approach us, work up to their project because the interdisciplinary work. For instance, we are now in a, hopefully we will get funding, because it's always the question of getting funding, yes or no, and projects will happen or not happen, or they stay in the drawer. We are now in the urban heat group in Berlin with meteorologists and medical people and claustrophy security, because the temperature in Berlin will be radically rising everywhere, but in Europe especially, and just to learn how to deal with it. There's a project that they want us to be part in.
So open to goes on.
Hey, thanks for your talk, and it's very nice to see our names on the list. But anyway, my question is maybe similar to the Hideo's question. I have two questions. First one is what motivates you to continue the project, because you work a lot of time around 15 years. So what is your source of the motivation? Yeah, I'm really curious. Maybe the question is the same for the Hideo as well.
Later.
I think there are a lot of relevant topics, extremely most existentially relevant topics on a planetary level, and that are difficult to be approached by, say, regular art, more traditional contemporary art. Like there's a lot of conceptual art that connects with climate change or biodiversity crisis, but it's more like it almost becomes illustrative in a way, even the conceptual way. And so it's really exciting when we see artists who are going into a lab to work on this. At the same time, scientists are very involved in this, but in the tradition of kind of an objectivity or an attempted objectivity, they are kind of refrained from this interaction with the public about their results. And so there's this, the artists kind of work in this middle way. They're coming from outside, they're diving in, they're learning the science, but they're using it to create artworks that are often participatory, that are interactive, participatory, and but also kind of critical of society, sometimes critical of science also, which is interesting. So it's a kind of new way of thinking. I would say the hybrid arts really is a new way of thinking. But the art books would find really exciting are things that physically couldn't have existed 30 or 40 years ago. Because technologies didn't exist, or the access. Even 20 years ago, many very few exceptions didn't exist. The budgets didn't exist. Symposia is a major important part in bioart because in 2000 the equipment was so expensive. So there was, and then there was the gatekeepers were saying no, only for scientists. Artists can't use $500,000 for a piece of equipment. Of course, now that $500,000 piece of equipment is $5,000. So you can buy a used one and have it in your own home lab if the government allows it.
I think in the end it's idealism that we believe in the art and the art that is actually taking of time. I mean, we can really say that in Architecture Berlin, we're not so much into the pseudo science. We're really interested if an artist that really seriously wants to understand a third part piece of science and then they do their own answer. But I think it could that very urgent question of climate crisis and it's driving us to maybe find good answers.
What motivated you to continue the metaPhorest? I'm really curious.
Yes, I have some answers about that. Probably maybe time for.
Okay.
You can talk.
Okay, right. Maybe. And the next question, the kind of related question, how do you briefly mentioned about that getting funding and that other stuff. How do you sustain your project? Very practical, but
Good question.
yeah,
Existential
that's because you are not belong to now. You have partnership with several university or company, but you have not belong to the university. So
exactly.
So
Yes. Not micro institution, we are molecular institution. How small, macro outreach, and we are independent, we have autonomy, but the Berlin Senate funds us for many years. Thank you very much. And so a lot depends on funding. We've worked ourselves to this that we kind of can live from it. And always funding related. Always.
There's the different grants. The last few years, the Berlin Senate has been particularly generous, but we also got the federal government, for EU consortia, our partners, organizations that we're connecting with, the technical universities. This was very generous with the grant. We're very honored to have got that, and it was extremely productive. So this is, that's part of it. As far as sustaining it in the long term, I think is why we built this website during the pandemic. It's an archive resource.
okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your good presentation. I have a question about DIY Hack the Panke. And I think through this project, there will be change in the awareness of participants who are artists for people. And how the algorithm change? Its research has been going for about 5 years. So I think in the human action on nature, there is interaction with human and nature.
Brilliant question. How is the river maybe changing in 5 years in the Hack the Panke, and maybe we changed, and I find it fascinating to repeat a workshop that we started in 18, like the life of and do this again. And it's true, there come new questions. As long as I ride the bike along the river, I always have to think of our research at every corner. I cannot not think of, here we did the water sample, and here we did the river is connected already, but the river also poses a question. Sometimes the water level is so low in the summer, and there's a drought in Berlin for quite some years going on. So the river speaks to us in a way. We want to say also the river gives back, and when the river offers us a lot of garbage. But yes.
It's interesting because the river had strange cultural history at the point. It also has changed a lot. It was Berlin in 1800 had 70,000 people, and in 1900 it had 2 million. And so the area where our exhibition space is was a little farming community in 1800, and in 1900 it was a working class area with lots of factories. And there's a song that was sung by Marlene Dietrich in the 1920s talking about the stinkbanker, because it was so polluted that stunk. After the Second World War, all those factories went bankrupt. It didn't survive, so then it was returned to health. And this city of West Berlin, in the western parts, they made this into a kind of a green zone. Working class neighborhoods, they made like parks around. So people now are very attached to it. In the summer, they go out and have picnics along. Trees have grown, green areas have sprouted up around the river, and there are some nice nightclubs, nightlife. So it's been interesting to bring in people who kind of enjoy the panka, but don't never really think about it as anything more than something visual, and suddenly discover there's what's living in the panka, especially on a micro level, or what pollution there is, or stories from it. So sound workshops, making instruments that are powered by water. There's and then suddenly the local public, they get a new view on their own river, which I think also brings them in more connection to nature, creates a sense of biophilia. At the same time, it's also a network for building interaction between artists, scientists, to make other projects possible. Some of the scientists have been able to bring the artists to lab to do other projects to further their.
Yeah, I really understand this project. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. 日本語で。レジデンシーアーティストレジデンシープログラムについて何度か言及があったと思うんですけれども、これはオープンコールで募集しているものなのかと、そのどのくらいの期間滞在して、制作と展示を行っているものなんでしょうか。
As for the residency program, and he is curious about so you form for artists for the residency, and you use a standard term and the period, how many months or and is determined or you said already not about that. Please.
Yeah, a lot of people think we do artist residency program. We don't do a real program like this, but if we're interested in an artist and a certain topic, we try to find maybe a university department or to find a lab to create relationship. And then maybe the artist can come, and we can go find together fundings. The artist can come. And so for case with Saša. So with Saša, we thought, oh wow, this is so interesting, working with soil. We bring her to the Rillig Lab. And they actually gave her, even for 2-3 months, they gave her a position. So she did a residency there and said, okay, now we want to get funding to actually make a new artwork. But that happens only every couple of years. This is so, it's also monetary, so too intense for us to do this regularly. But we always help to connect, support the artists, to find maybe synergy with scientists.
It's something we've trying to do. Like we've been trying to get some grants from the EU, but it's not been successful as part of consortia to arrange residencies. The technical university, we got this grant. We were able to choose 2 artists, but it was limited in that we couldn't, for instance, pay accommodations. So we had to choose Berlin-based artists. We pay a fee for them to be involved, we give them money to create artworks, and then the university brought them in, allowed them to use the lab, and taught them how to use the labs. So this was very useful. With Saša, then the university paid for as an outside researcher to come in at the invitation of Matthias Rillig. And then we've been supporting the production of the artwork with funds from the Berlin Senate. then there are some other things that come about again through networks from conferences we've done or from the DOI where an artist and a scientist have gotten to know each other and exchange information and get invitations, and a scientist might enable an artist to produce a work or do some research on a smaller scale. The scientists are working in labs, so they have to get the permission, but to bring somebody in for a week or a few days is quite a very small scale, or maybe you get some results, test results. And some of that happens through us, some of it happens just with people and they go and do their own project. Or sometimes it's just a scientist meeting regularly with an artist and saying, yeah, this is viable, you could do this on here in your own studio at a DIY level by doing this. And some of the workshops we do also are enabling that. In the Mind of Fungi, we had a portion where we worked with a biologist who has an open lab in Berlin to do workshops on making fungal biomaterials. So basically growing mycelium from tree mushrooms in molds, baking it so that it dies, but you have this form. And try to create a community of people working with this fungal material, and trying designers or artists, sometimes just people who are curious. It's the same as some of the other workshops where there's a learning curve. With the microplastics, we had a father and son during a school vacation come in and do the workshop with a group of other people because they wanted to do something together, and the son was interested in science, which was really nice. Other people were in because they had heard about microplastics, but they wanted to see it literally with their own eyes and know that it exists and isolated from the environment, do more citizen research. So it's a kind of an interesting level on that. So there are different levels, and we do what's possible with what budget we have. Each series, we put a grant for a series of 5 or 7 workshops, and it comes through or it doesn't come through. So it happens or it doesn't happen. We do that a couple times a year, and we're lucky we get 1 or 2 grants coming through.
ですかね。なんか結構いろんなケースがあるけど、なんか普通の通常のアーティストインテリジェンスでなんか何日からいつまで募集しますって言って何かをやってそこからプロジェクトが立ち上がるというよりは、むしろなんか彼らの方で割とトピックを常にサーチをしていて、そこでなんか最初の一歩はむしろ彼らからコメントこの人に結びつけると面白いんじゃないかみたいなところから動き出すのが結構多分基本で、それで出会った先でプロジェクトが立ち上がるみたいなケースを割と紹介していたと思いますし、あとはDIYのケースとか、あとなんかオープンにしている科学者たちのコミュニティみたいなのがあった時に、それを、それに乗っかる形っていうか、さらにそれをこのプラットフォームを使ってコネクトするっていう、なんかよくかなり積極的な仕掛けを通常のアーティストインテリジェンスのコストとよりは組み込んで多分プロジェクトを手掛けているっていう。だから展示のクリエイターというプロジェクトのクリエイターを文化や感じなので、そこはちょっと普通の違う感じです。Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 日本語でも英語が続いちゃったけど、ところでなんすかこれみたいな。ないですか。僕は結構あるんですけど。
一個一個のプロジェクトで。
とか、ないです。日本語です。
僕が気になったのは、セルフケアの部分で、乳がんの人の対応を適正をしている。対面の話を なんかそれって結構、女性的な部分が多いのかな。そうすると、なんか男性で同じような、自分に対してが時間を持つ場合には、なんか、他のアプローチが、男性版だったらどういうそうですか。
私が書かないのでやり。僕で、いや、全然変わんない。So that's a question in your project self-care related to the BRCA1 breast cancer. And this question was related to how was there a male equivalent to such artworks, or if you were to do one, how would you approach it? What kind of cancers, if you have any in mind?
I think the artist would have to approach us. I know in Lindsay's case with this gene, there's a higher rate of men can get breast cancer too, and there's also in both men and women who have this mutation higher rates of colorectal cancer. So there's basically, with women it's really intense because medical suggestion is basically mastectomy. So Liz is looking at recommendation that they get a mastectomy in their early 30s and a hysterectomy in the late 30s. That's the medical formula in the US. If you don't follow that, then some insurances will argue about covering you if you get cancer. So also very harsh. But there's also the male family members also have higher risks. I think it would have, it would be what an artist had a project and approached us. So it happened to be that Lindsay had been doing this research because it was existentially close to their, to both their interest in art and science and their own personal situation, and then also working at doing an MA at Symbiotica, we're able to follow through on this. And so, for you. Yeah. Fine. Right. Yeah. There are that about with the not
Thanks so much for this meeting, for your presentation. It's actually, I'm doing a lot of collaboration work with scientists in the different universities. And I'm just quite curious because I'm a more designer rather than artist. So to just talk with the scientists, more quite direct impact, we can just show. But but I used to work as a media artist. I know how explorative setting requires, and also that just expand more creativity. But at the same time, scientists have a really different mindset. So I just wonder, how are you going to break the ice for the And also, is there any like a differences in between of the like in Berlin in Germany? I mean, like of course, just only the person who just do that such as well can understand it. I just wonder, like, do you feel like a difficult? And also, I just really kind of know about like more how you just measure the impact of success. I mean, like it's always like difficult to just judge, but do you have when you just curate your work, what kind of points is and for instance, are you just prioritizing for the conceptual, like a delivery or like sometimes more visual impact or something like a story, how storytelling is quite different. It depends. I just want about. I mean, it's gonna be a difficult question.
Thank you for the question. Brilliant, and that brings us probably experiences. It's a lot of assumption and expectations that we all think, yeah, fine, objective, neutral, analytic. Art is emotional, irrational. Like, this is a classic cliche.
Yeah.
Tendency, yes, but there's a lot of there's overlapping. But I would absolutely agree with you that we all speak different languages here. And in like, except a few exceptions, there were very much like sometimes even artists and scientists are in one person, but that's I think it's important if we go interdisciplinary, we need a lot of time.
Yeah.
We all speak different languages, so we often are. We are kind of. I consider myself as a translator. I consider like sometimes not only sitting in a room, but actually translating in another format. For instance, and this is why it's so fascinating. I have to write a paper on workshop. I mean, I write a paper on workshopology. Yes. I think the workshop can actually playful invite everyone to speak in different languages. And then somehow we meet, but we need a radical openness.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's a good proof if certain people, scientists, artists, designers, everyone involved, we want to work together. And then we go big our ears. Would you be interested? And the way we speak about that, other people have very curiosity. Other people say, my work. Other people say, I have questions. I would like to have other answers. And the best is when you take people that are all open for new languages, for new paths, for new methodologies. And what is very important, I think what we do at Art of the we take very often the position and as if we are mentors and ambassadors for the art. And we worship the scientists, of course, but we very much always want to support the artist. And when scientists approach us, say, oh, Art Lab Berlin, can you be in our project? Yeah, we say, you want artists. They're not only science communicators. We have to look at them on eye level, yeah?
Right.
So this is our first translation, juggling.
I see.
Let's come and meet all together. What do we all want? And then it's like an interesting way of
So you're discovering it as you just go through.
Yes.
I think the artists also have to want to go into the lab to learn about what it is and be become lab ready, and also to work with the science, not just document it.
And also, I just wonder, when you can choose the artist, do you just sense, those kind of like practically, like, they are more easier to just communicate, or it just really depends on that.
Depends on the person, depends on I mean, I've heard stories from bad collaborations. Usually it's because either because the artist wants to do a conceptual piece but isn't really willing to learn the science, or isn't, is just kind of looking at a little bit, or sometimes or the scientist doesn't really understand why an artist is there, but usually it doesn't go that far. That doesn't happen because when the scientist doesn't want it, doesn't collaboration, but they don't open their lab if they don't understand, they don't have a reason or an interest. So it's usually the other way. So I think we usually try. We've had artists approach us and I'm like, well, what do you know about the science? What do you do? What are you interested? Have you been in a lab? And we can actually just kind of doing a documentation or something else, maybe I suggest they look elsewhere. We did have one time where we connected but this is a long time ago, like 10 years ago, connected an artist and a scientist. And the scientist was really nervous. He thought that if he connected with an artist would ruin their reputation. But they were on the other hand, but also really intrigued to find that somebody interested in their theme.
Yeah, of course.
So they gave a lot of help, but they actually forbade us to mention. I was really curious. It was a kind of secret collaboration. But that was an exception. It was 10 years ago. Even 3 or 4 years after that, we were having scientists say they wanted to do this kind of level of STEM to STEAM became popular in Germany well before it wasn't. Maybe a generational change as well in the early 20s.
Okay, so okay, so thank you very much, and
Thank you all.
discussion about interdisciplinary. ということで、この後、なんか役に立てあるので、やる方はぜひ、残っていただければと思います。それでは、興味深いディスカッションありがとうございました。So, next week. 来週は、we will have the 86th seminar by Tomoya Ishibashi. で、来週で。覚えてない。You don't remember. Next week. So, Tomoya Ishibashi and Kazutoshi Uemura. Right? So, okay, and they will be sure to put the written works in each video. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.